Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Southwest Affiliate Stroke Bootcamp series. We are excited to offer this 15-week course as a way to educate stroke coordinators in key components of their role, provide tools and resources to build and maintain successful programs, and to assist in building a large network of peers. Before we get started, we would like to go over a couple housekeeping items. To avoid background noise, all attendees have been placed on mute. We please ask to hold all questions to the very end, where the teleconference host will give instructions on how to unmute your line. Please note you will only be able to claim your CE credits at the end of the 15-week series on September 27th. A copy of today's slides and all handouts will be sent to you within a week of today's call. For future webinar registrations, please visit www.part.org/SWA quality. Today we have 4 great speakers who will be presenting on the topic of submitting an abstract to the International Stroke Conference. Our first speaker, Sarah Duzinski, is a Quality and Systems Improvement Director with the American Heart Association. She received her Master of Public Health degree from the University of Texas Houston Health Science Center, El Paso Regional Campus, as well as a Bachelor of Arts degree in Anthropology from the University of Vermont. She is a former research scientist with over 18 publications in the field of trauma and injury. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Audrey. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us. Today we're going to talk about how to get an abstract submitted just in time to prepare something for International Stroke Conference 2019. So I have no disclosures. So writing and submitting an abstract can seem kind of intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. Today we're going to try to sort of demystify the process, and I'm going to discuss some of the basic how-tos of abstract submission and then turn it over to 3 presenters who have submitted successful abstracts in the field of stroke care. This will give you a sense of what projects your colleagues are presenting. And then I'm going to talk more about the housekeeping aspects of presenting an abstract. Having presented and reviewed numerous abstracts and publications, I'm going to give you a little bit of the reviewer's perspective. I also want to draw your attention to some important reference documents that we're going to be discussing today. They will be emailed post-webinar, but I'm also going to show you how to access them before then as well. Okay, so the first thing that I really want to sort of share with you, let you know, is that you can do this. Stroke program nursing professionals really do have all of the right ingredients to be successful in sharing their knowledge. You tend to be self-starters, you've got attention to detail, passion for quality, and really a sincere desire to impact the outcomes of stroke patients. So, why would you want to submit an abstract? This is really a great quote by Sir Isaac Newton. If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. We really do learn from our predecessors and our peers. We build on knowledge that came before us. It's how we improve practice, how we get better. And so presenting an abstract is really a way to do that. It also gives you an opportunity to gain new insight and perspective on the important work that you're doing. You can enhance your public speaking and presentation skills. You get to positively represent your institution on an international stage. And you also get credit for all of that hard work that you're doing. Okay, so where to begin? I always like to begin with the end in mind. That said, I like to know when the deadline is. So just so that you know, the drop-dead deadline for submission and resubmission is August 14th, 2018 at 11:59 p.m. The other thing that I really like to know is where my reference tools are. Where is all of the information that I need to be successful in submitting an abstract? So one thing that you can do between now and when you receive the slides and the attendant documents is do a Google search, Submit Science ISC. It will take you to this link that is shown here. And really, it's got almost everything that you need to submit an abstract. It's got tips, guidelines, what the categories are for submitting an abstract, and you also find examples of previously accepted abstracts. There's also an online link to the application system. And so as far as coming up with an abstract idea, typically for research, you want to fill a gap in the literature. Or for process improvement, you want to answer a practical question or identify an issue that presents itself in your day-to-day work, something that offers an opportunity to improve clinical practice and would also be beneficial to others. Okay, so thinking about best practices and guidelines. This may seem like a no-brainer, but I can tell you that it is not. One of the most important things to a reviewer is that you follow the instructions. So I really recommend that you access the abstract guidelines and the Writing Good Abstracts documents. You read them, you print them, you reference them, and you reread them as you're writing your abstract. This is really critical. You would be amazed at what gets submitted. And you don't want to make it easy to reject your abstract by submitting work with spelling or typographical errors, or by showing the reviewers at first glance that you did not follow the instructions, that you didn't honor the word count or follow the required structure. You also want to give yourself plenty of time for draft creation and revision prior to the deadline. We're going to talk a little bit more about the deadline and other aspects of it, but you want to build in time for various levels of review, and you want to back your internal deadlines up to that deadline and give yourself plenty of time. The other tip is to select the best fit for your abstract category. You don't want your abstract to get rejected because you submitted it in the wrong category. The categories are professional development, acute care, rehabilitation and recovery, and you can read a little bit more about that on the ISC website. The other thing you really want to pay attention to is the required structure. For the nursing symposium, that is background and issues, purpose, methods, results, and conclusions. I've seen abstracts submitted that omitted an entire section or added a section. You don't want to do that, trust me. The other thing you really want to be thinking about as you develop your abstract idea is you want to really be able to articulate the purpose, the rationale, and the conclusions clearly. You want to be able to explain this to a high school student and have it be understandable. And you want to make sure that the purpose, the rationale, and the conclusion are clearly articulated in your abstract. Okay, so again, I highly recommend that you read the common mistakes and traps to avoid. They mention some really practical things that you don't want to do, like failing to state the purpose or failing to provide a rationale for your study. And I also just offer some great tips and tricks. The other thing you really want to pay attention to is the review criteria. Whether you're submitting an abstract or a manuscript, you want to know what is the rubric that that reviewer is looking at to evaluate your work. So in this case, it's scientific merit, practicality, organization, presentation, and technical quality. For practicality, you know, is it practical? Is it going to help others? Is it well organized? Is it visually appealing in its presentation? And is it technically correct? And then scientific merit, is it in line with, you know, scientific guidelines and things that are current right now? The other thing that I strongly recommend is enlisting a trusted reviewer or two or more at your institution. This is somebody that has maybe had experience submitting an abstract before, somebody that has a good eye, and somebody that you trust to, you know, honestly, you want them to redline your work. You want them to look at your work with a critical eye to the criteria, the guidelines, for overall clarity and cogency, and you actually want to provide them, when you provide them your abstract to review, you want to provide a copy of the criteria and the guidelines as well so that they can look at that. The other thing that I need to mention is the embargo policy. So AHA has an embargo policy So once your abstract is accepted, abstracts and presentations are embargoed for release at the date and time of the presentation. So embargoed information cannot be shared with anyone except, of course, people within your institution or people at AHA or ASA prior to release at ISC. And then the other thing that we have is a data and logo usage policy. So American Heart Association has a quality research department, and one of their many responsibilities is to review and approve documents that mention Get With The Guidelines. So those could be abstracts, manuscripts, websites. So they have this policy, and that will be emailed to you post-webinar. And really the purpose of it is to ensure proper use of Get With The Guidelines and proper use of the trademark symbol. So you can work with your AHA QSI director to request review, and they can submit that request with you at qualityresearch@heart.org. And you do want to allow a 14-day turnaround time to receive your feedback, and you want to build that into your timeline. So you want to back that up to the submission deadline. Okay, so in summary, I just want to reemphasize you can do this. This is very doable, especially if you follow the instructions, give yourself plenty of time, enlist a draft reviewer to get some critical review, and honor the Get With The Guidelines data and logo usage guidelines review process. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Audrey, who's going to introduce our next speaker. And at the very end of the talk, we will be taking questions. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Sarah, for speaking on best practices. Again, we will be holding questions till the very end of this webinar. Our second presenter, Stephanie Jeanson, is a clinical nurse expert for Houston Methodist Hospital, where she has worked for 12 years. She has had 14 years of nursing experience, including acute care, ICU, management, and education. Stephanie's passions include stroke and neuro patients. She is married with 2 children and 1 on the way. Congratulations, Stephanie. Now we will turn it over to her once I give her permission.
Hi, are you able to see that screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Stephanie Johnson. I'm so happy to be presenting kind of from the perspective of a first-timer submitting an abstract and getting accepted to the International Stroke Conference. It was a really kind of surprise with me and my group that we were accepted after our first time submitting an article or an abstract. So what brought us to the point where we...
Hey, Stephanie, it's Audrey. Sorry to interrupt you. Do you mind putting your slideshow on slideshow mode, please?
Oh, you know what? Sorry, it was my monitor. One moment.
Oh, it's okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. So what really got us started with wanting to submit an abstract was basically within my group that I worked with, Katie Broadway and Jason Lee, we all worked closely with our stroke program director, and we wanted to help make improvements in some of the areas that we knew that we were falling out on for our accreditation. And it finally got to the point where instead of just complaining about it, we decided we wanted to do something about it. So that's kind of how we started to develop our idea and how we got started. I would like to recommend, especially if this is your first time submitting an abstract and going through the process, that you definitely want to find a team, find a group of people that has that same passion about the topic that you do, so that you don't have to do all the work by yourself. It was so amazing to be able to work with my colleagues, Jason and Katie, to be able to get different perspectives, split up the work. And lucky for us, Jason in particular actually works in our research department at my hospital, so he had access to all kinds of resources that we didn't, being more at the bedside. So that was definitely a bonus. I would like to encourage, as mentioned already, to not be intimidated by the process. That since you already have a passion about stroke and neuro patients and quality improvement, you really just need to harness that energy and really direct it into just doing your project. Don't be intimidated by what others may be doing or what you think people want to hear during or want to read about and be presented at an International Stroke Conference. If you have that passion to create that quality work, then that'll definitely shine through. And I think that that was really the case for us with our abstract presentation. So just a little bit of background about our presentation is we were having problems with, I'm sure that anybody working with a stroke patient in TPA, you kind of have issues with compliance with monitoring and documentation. And so instead of complaining about it and continuing to get nowhere with our efforts, we decided to fix the problem. And after doing all the research, we found that there was not a validated tool that could be used to monitor our stroke patients. And that was our idea, and that was our trigger to get started on creating a validated, modified NIH stroke scale. We really focused on what could not only provide the best outcome for the patient, but then would be pleasing and easy to use for the nurse itself. So we definitely had a twofold goal. And after doing research, literature review, networking, expert consultation, we were able to develop our scale based on, with permission from the NIH, to basically remove some of the elements that were a little more tedious, a little more room for error with intra-rater reliability, and kind of stick to the basics. And so you can see on the screen that our NIH stroke scale was basically reduced down to 8 areas. So when we did our research, thanks to my colleague Jason in the research department, we were able to actually validate a scale that had 100% correlation between the modified scale and the NIH stroke scale. So we definitely had a lot of caveats with our project, that it was a small selection and that it was not created to replace the NIH, but definitely to be used in conjunction to monitor the patient and to give the nurse more time to actually provide direct patient care instead of spending all the time completing an exam and documenting it. And you can see that it saved us what we calculated out to 180 minutes of time in a 12-hour shift given back to the patient. So this was just some questions that had got brought up at our facility. But in conclusion, I just want to recommend that you don't have to recreate the wheel. You can definitely look for something that's existing within your facilities and use your passion and your desire to make improvements not only for the patient but for the staff to guide you in a direction to be able to develop an idea. And once you have that idea and you're excited about it, then it doesn't feel like work whatsoever, and that intimidation factor definitely decreases. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie, for speaking on post-TPA vitals. Our third presenter, Alisa T Browne, is an assistant professor at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences Department of Neurology and Telemedicine, core member of the Center for Translational Neurosciences. Her participation on the governor-appointed State Stroke Task Force Committee, serving as the program evaluator of the state's largest telemedicine program in collaboration with the Arkansas Department of Health progressed to recently publishing 2 mobile phone applications to improve emergency services in rural areas. And now we will turn it over to Alisa.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, you can hear me.
Thanks for joining in today. I think our first 2 presenters did a great job of telling us all the details and information needed to put an abstract together. My presentation is taking, how to find that idea within your program. And this is something that I tell our outreach coordinators in our telemedicine program a lot, is to look at the data and find that idea. So my presentation is on one of our ISC posters from this year, and that was why are acute ischemic stroke patients or AIS patients not receiving IV TPA in a telestroke network. And by the way, I know everybody wants to put an abstract in this year because it's going to be in Hawaii for 2019. There were no financial disclosures, no unlabeled or unapproved uses disclosure. Okay, so let's talk about the abstract components. On the main components, first, let's all talk about what we have in common as a coordinator, and that is data. Data acquisition and analysis is extremely critical in stroke centers of care. And why is that? Well, it's because data analysis can indicate areas where improvement is needed within your program. So to begin, do you see a data trend in your stroke center? And to try this, you could try writing an observed data trend down, organize it by how you collect the data, and retrospectively, data that was already collected, state like an objective or a reason for this data trend. And so, for example, in our poster, we had noticed that a large number of our AIS patients were not receiving IV TPA. And so we looked at first, how was the data collected? Well, we have a call center that collects the data during each consult. So the next question is when was the data collected? We did that throughout 2015. So what is the objective or reason for collecting the data? Well, the reason was to determine reasons for not giving IV activase to potentially eligible patients with acute ischemic stroke. Great. Now you have data. Now you have an objective. Now you need to conduct a literature search on the data topic. And at this point, do not panic. How to do a search of published medical information? Well, there are different search engines to do this. So we use the United States National Library of Medicine, or NLM, that was started 22 years ago, and that's called PubMed. PubMed is a free search engine primarily accessing the Medline database of biomedical topics. It's all published papers on several different topics. So first off, you need to search your data trend or idea or keywords. So in PubMed, which here I shared a screen from that, enter your search terms. And in this case, it was telestroke eligible patients not receiving TPA. That's pretty wordy. You probably don't need that many words, just the key search terms. And then at this point, now you can look at the most current published research, and then you can choose which publication best fits your data topic. Try reading those published papers. If you have a problem understanding something, don't be afraid to ask somebody at your institution what something means or provide some more clarification. So now you need to write your background in at least 2 to 3 sentences. The ISC has a word limit in their abstracts, so you don't have a lot of words to present your idea down, so you need to be very clear and very succinct in your beginning couple of sentences. So to write the background section of an abstract, the first sentence should state the overall understood information. The last two sentences should state the why your data trend is of interest. So in our abstract background, for example, we reported that a third of potentially eligible AIS patients who arrived at our stroke-ready hospitals in 4.5 hours or less did not receive TPA. However, there were no related studies from other telestroke networks. Now for the results. So, and this is very basic information, and you don't have to provide a lot of statistics if that is intimidating for you. Just write down the basic numbers and percentages. So, for example, in our results here on the left panel where it says telestroke consults for 2015, we had 809 patients who received a consult. 238 of those received TPA. 571 received no thrombolytics. Of the 571, 305 were AIS patients based on clinical evaluation. That formed 53% of no thrombolytics and 38% of all consults. Of that 305, we had data available on 276. Now we're in the right panel. Most common reasons for no thrombolytics included 44% had minimal deficits, 27% were outside the 4.5-hour time window, and 19% were next of kin refusal. So other less common causes for non-treatment of AIS were abnormal labs, recent surgery, neoplasms, and hemorrhage. So additional data information. The minimal deficits was the most common reason for the AIS not treated with the IV TPA. The 27% of the acute ischemics who came in and went over the 4.5 hours were due to excess time spent in door to CT. The 19% next of kin refusal was higher than the 6% reported nationally. So like it was previously said by Sarah, that you pick up on these data trends. Why is this important? Because this can tell you where you need improvements in your program. So in conclusion, our abstract reported a data trend, its associated problems, and the reasons. The minimal deficits was the most common reason. The excess and door-to-CT time warranted an increase in mock training sessions with our local EMS for each spoke site and spoke emergency department staff. The next of kin refusal being quite high at 19% was so much higher than the 6% reported by other hospitals nationally, may have been secondary to explaining that risk factor versus benefits in the video conferences, so that had to be revisited. So that's the end of my presentation, and I look forward to receiving some questions from you guys, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Alisa. Our final and last speaker, Lee Allen, is a stroke program coordinator at Scott & White Medical Center, Temple in Temple, Texas. Her background is adult critical care, caring for complex medical patients, post-operative cardiovascular patients, and neuro-ortho trauma patients. Lee Allen has been a stroke coordinator since 2009 in a variety of hospital settings involved in all aspects of stroke program development for initial certification, as well as ongoing stroke program monitoring and compliance for recertification. And now I will turn it over to Lee.
Hi, everybody. I'm just getting my presentation up. And thanks, everybody, for just joining us today. And thank you to Larissa and Deb Motz, who invited me to speak today. So I'm going to cover our abstract, and a lot of the themes or things we've discussed, topics, you're going to hear echoed in mine as well. So I do have a disclosure to make. I am a Joint Commission reviewer for disease-specific. I do stroke and sepsis. I'm intermittent, so I'm out about once a month, maybe twice a month doing stroke reviews. No other disclosures for the group. And then where to start? So where is it you want to start for your abstract, what you're going to submit? And a big thing is, I would say, if there's something that interests you, so think about those topics, and then are you seeing trends in your data? So when you see our presentation, how ours got started is that we did a process change in our stroke activation process in our ER, and then as I was getting data ready to report out for our end of year, we noticed these trends in our data. And we do an annual report out for our ER in February of the following year, so we go by calendar years for our processes and our data. And we noticed that, and so we started looking at it, and it really timed up nicely because then the window opened for our abstract submission for ISC, and we were able to submit. So you probably will have ideas about how your data is going, where things are looking, or if you're reporting out and you have to do a quality check on your information, you'll see that. And then one thing I want to share with the group is that I can remember I've been going to the International Stroke Conference and other conferences, but particularly that one since 2010. And there have been many times that I've sat in the audience and listened to other presentations and been like, well, I could have done that, or we're doing that at our stroke center, or, you know, I could have written that up, or why didn't I think about that? And so I was talking to a friend one time after I just got back from ISC, and I was getting ready to have my first idea, like, hey, I want to do this topic, and we talked about it, and I got a little bit discouraged in our conversation, and then finally I said, I don't feel like I'm ever going to have, like, a new idea or something original or organic, or, you know, I was just kind of overwhelmed myself just about what can I, how can I contribute to stroke? And that person was really great with me. She said, it's not so much about the topic you choose, but it's more about the question you ask. And I like to share that with you because you know, there may be somebody else out there that's asking the same question you ask, and by you getting your information and sharing this data, and you're going to be able to give that information to somebody else, be like, oh, that person is having the same thing I'm having, or they're seeing the same thing, or, you know, or they've asked the same question I've asked. So I really like to encourage people that, you know, when you're out talking about things, I'm like, well, have you written that up? Have you shared that with somebody? Like, what are you doing with this? So it's really good to just share information. And another thing about submitting abstracts is that you're probably going to submit an abstract or and it's not going to get accepted every time. And that's okay. But we still need to just start contributing to the information and the knowledge that we have for stroke, because as we do that, we ultimately improve the care our stroke patients get. So just want to encourage everybody on that. And then another big question to ask is, does it need IRB approval? So at my institution, when we went through this process, I had to fill out a form that says, is this a quality improvement project, or do you need to go for IRB submission? So that is one thing you want to make sure at your institution where that is that you want to ask those people who can help you answer that question. And so, and then for us, we have to track that form and keep it, so they've come back to us and say, no, we submitted, and they said, no, we did not need to go on with IRB approval. And then as Sarah said, I just want to echo this, be aware of your submission dates. Procrastination is not your friend. So, you know, we are in the window for ISC submission right now. I know that I usually watch the AANN for their stroke conference submissions too. So watch your dates. It's really important. And then it's also good to know, Sarah pointed out about your data being embargoed. So if we're going to report, if you're going to submit for ISC, that data can't go out any other place until after ISC takes place. And then so now you're all ready, you've identified your idea, your own process, so review the submission details for the organization you're going to submit to. So I have up here from 2019, the International Stroke Conference, and when you go, and you can just, I think somebody already showed this, but you can Google, you can go and get on ISC, and it's really nice. They have a little button you click, it says review submission abstraction or submit abstract, and it has those information here, and so you'll see in my box, I have there there's for ISC, the abstract submission guidelines and categories, and then how to write a good ISC abstract, and then also for nursing. And then I like for nursing too, they also have example of previously accepted nursing symposium. Before I submitted my abstract, I did read all this, and there's good tips in there. One of the things is you want to make sure you've got a good title on your abstract. You want something that somebody's like, hey, let's look at this one, or hey, this will be a good one. So that is very important. So there are actually good tips and tricks in there, I would call them, about writing your submission, your abstract. And so definitely review those before you get ready to submit your abstract. And then you want to make sure, too, that you have your abstract proofread before you submit it. So that's why you need to make sure you've got these timelines in place. You know when your window opens and when's the, when can you submit. But you want to have your own. So when is it you're going to have it ready? Who's going to proofread it for you? Who needs to review it for you? If there's somebody, you want to make sure you review your abstract before you go and you submit it. So, and then after you do all that, you can go back, you can just go to the website and you click on there and you submit your abstract. And the actual submission process for your abstract on the website is it's very user-friendly. This was my first one you're going to see. It's the first one that we did in 2016. And the hardest part was getting my data ready, having everybody read it, making sure I incorporated everything, was everybody on board with what I was going to submit. So that was probably the longest process, and the actual submission took me just a few minutes. And then I will share with you last year that I was up till probably 11 o'clock the night of submission, submitting 3 abstracts. So again, just make sure that you are getting everything done and you've timed out your own internal timeline for when you want to get this submitted. And this is our actual poster presentation we did. I will say that I'm fortunate that I'm in an organization where we have our own print shop, and so they printed my poster, but do not get worried about that. You can actually have ISC. I think they print your posters there, and you can pick them up at the conference center, which is really nice. I probably would have done that, except I don't think I would have got reimbursed for the cost of it, but from my organization, but we were able to print it here for us. So you can see how my poster laid out. We had our background and purpose, and we had our methods, and then we had our results, conclusions, and of course you want to have what other your references you're going to use to support the process and your, why you went this way that supports your idea of what happened. In the center we laid out like our actual data, and then the process we changed. And this really follows the submission too with the guidelines. So this is the example of our poster, and I had our vascular neurologist, our stroke medical director, she was on it with me. So she was definitely somebody who proofread all my abstract before I submitted it. So it was a really great experience. I would encourage anybody to do it, and just encourage you too that if you don't get accepted the first time, to keep trying and keep submitting that information, because there will be somebody who will learn something from your process. And from us personally, just here at my organization, when we did this data process and we reviewed our data, it actually allowed us to go out and discuss making process changes and standardization throughout our division. So it allowed us to really support those changes. Like, we made this process change here, here's our data, here's our outcomes, this is what we're seeing. So it really enabled us to have further discussions even in my own organization. So there's always benefit there. So look forward to having your questions, and thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Lee, and thank you to all of our speakers today. We now want to open the floor to questions. You can either type a question in the Q&A section of WebEx on the right side of your screen, or press *1 to unmute your line. So I'll start off. We do have a question popped up. I'll just read it off. So someone wants to know, when you guys say submitting an abstract, what exactly do you mean? They thought abstracting was basically what we hire Q-Centrics for, but it sounds more like submitting a paper of some kind, and how does this tie into the conference in Hawaii? Okay, Sarah will take it.
Yeah, so Jennifer, that's not a dumb question at all. So yeah, and in fact, that comes up a lot. So yes, abstracting data is one thing, and submitting an abstract is a separate process, but they do sort of tie together because the skills that you need to abstract data are similar to the skills that you need to write up an abstract. So basically, the purpose of an abstract, the reason we have these scientific conferences like International Stroke Conference, is so that everyone can share their findings. So there's the nursing symposium track, and there is the research track. And so on the research track, the idea is to contribute to the scientific body of knowledge. So people submit an abstract of a research project or a quality improvement project that they're working on. And the purpose of submitting that abstract is the first layer of peer review. So you submit an abstract, and the idea is that you share that information with your peers, and the idea is that you could eventually publish your work in a peer-reviewed journal. But that first step of submitting your abstract of your project idea or your project concept or with your preliminary results is to get critique and ideas and questions from your peers, so that when you present that abstract, people come back and say, oh, well, that's great, but did you think of this? Or, you know, it's opening up that first layer of peer review. And that's why conferences often say, please, you know, do not submit to more than one conference at a time. You submit your abstract to one conference, and you might get some really good questions or ideas, and that might inspire you to make some changes to your project, changes to the structure or the methods or to your results, that would then inspire you to submit another abstract to a different conference to get another layer of peer review. So I hope that answers your question, and I hope that is a helpful response. If not, feel free to email me offline as well, and I can elucidate it a little further.
And just a quick reminder, to ask questions, you can either press *1 to unmute your lines or type it in the Q&A section of WebEx on the right side of your screen.
Sure. And there was a second part to that question. I see that it says, and how does it tie into the conference in Hawaii? So for those of you who are new stroke coordinators, every year in January or February, we have International Stroke Conference. This year, coming up in 2019, I think it's January 2019 or February, it's going to be in Hawaii. And it's in years past, it was in LA, and then previously it was in Houston. And it's an opportunity, you know, for everyone to share information and to release scientific findings and whatnot. But it's also an opportunity. We do have an awards dinner, and so it's an opportunity to celebrate the award from the previous year. So at that 2019, we'll be celebrating the awards that just came out recently to stroke sites. So if anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to hit *6 and unmute your phone, or type your question into the question box.
All right, we do have another question pop up. What are the dates for abstract submission for 2020? Do I know that?
I don't know that those dates have been finalized yet for 2020, but I imagine that they would follow a similar, it would be a similar timeline. It may not be August 14th for 2020, but it'll probably be around a similar time frame. So you'd probably want to start thinking about that in early spring and working on that through your review process.
A reminder, please press *1 to unmute your line, or you can type it in Q&A on the right side of the screen.
Excuse me, speakers. There are no questions in queue at this time on the phone.
Great. Well, if there are no more questions, we want to thank our speakers today. for their presentations about abstract submissions. A couple reminders before signing off: you will only be able to claim your CME credits at the end of the 15-week series on September 27th, and a copy of today's slides and handouts will be sent within a week of today's call. Thanks again for everybody, and we will see you next week.